I suck at jiu-jitsu. How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
I guess to suck less.
Ladies and gentlemen, the diabolical leader of the Headlock Squad.
Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 100 and... Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 217 of the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show. So today I have a really exciting one for you guys. I have an interview that I just did with Henry Akins. So if you don't know who Henry Akins is, he is, a lot of people consider him to be Rickson's best black belt and one of the best conceptual teachers of jiu-jitsu that there is. And so as you guys know, that's been something we've been loving on the podcast, and conceptual jiu-jitsu, different training methods, all kinds of different things. And we kind of touch on all of them. It was really cool to get to talk to somebody who just had such a deep understanding of jiu-jitsu. I actually did a seminar with him a couple weeks ago, and it was a 2-day seminar. My dad and I went, and man, he just, for 6 hours total, just blew our minds. And my dad's learned from him more than I have, but just for me, it was really, really eye-opening. It was really, really amazing. And even training method-wise, there were these big takeaways. But for me, there was an even bigger takeaway. And it was what we kind of talk about actually at the very, very end of this episode. It is how he thinks about something that we tell our students all the time. We all, myself included, I tell you guys when it comes to jiu-jitsu about removing physicality, about relaxing. And he understood it in a way and explained it in a way that I had not heard. And to me, I think I'm 10 days out from the recording of this from when we did the seminar. And 10 days later, I still haven't thought about anything else other than this idea on relax. And so, hopefully you guys will like that and just like this interview in general. And yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Henry Akins, how are you doing today?
I'm awesome, man. Thanks for having me on, Josh.
Yes, thank you for being on the show. I'm 10 days, I think, removed. 9 days removed from doing a 2-day seminar with you in Florida. And man, there was some hidden jiu-jitsu there, without a doubt. There were definitely things that, as we were talking about, they had to be felt. They're hard to just believe that they're there, but when you experience them, especially for me, I've done jiu-jitsu for 15 years, and there were certain things I felt in that seminar that I've never felt in 15 years. And so it was really, really interesting to me to kind of feel that. We're going to dive deeper on a lot of that stuff. But I thought a good place to start, and this is a question I have asked a lot of coaches, and I've gotten a lot of answers that I don't feel like are very complete. And it's such a basic jiu-jitsu question, but I feel like your perspective on it is different. And it is just, you often talk about fundamentals in jiu-jitsu. You often talk about, you should start focusing on fundamentals. And people tell me that on my podcast all the time. And often I ask, well, what are the fundamentals? And people, they always say the same things. Closed guard armbar. Like, okay. So that's what we should be focused on. And so for me, if I, ask you, what are kind of those fundamentals that beginners should be focused on?
For me, the fundamentals is right. Like, you want to lay out a good foundation for students. And, a big part of that foundation is, like, for me, understanding, okay, these are the main positions in jiu-jitsu, right? You have mount, you have top, bottom, and then you have bottom. You have cross-eyed, you have the top position, you have the bottom position. And then once you understand, okay, these are the positions, then you have a very specific objective from each position, right? So from the mount, what am I looking to achieve? What am I looking to do? Well, I'm looking to submit the person, or sometimes if they give me an opportunity, I can take the back, right? If they turn too much and they expose their back, I can take the back. So like in certain positions, we're always looking to first and foremost, maintain that position. And then B, obviously, we're always looking for the finish, right? And so I think that's a really good place to start, is just explaining to people, hey, look, these are the positions in jiu-jitsu. These are the good positions you want to be in. These are the bad positions. When you're in the bottom of cross-side, that's not a good position for you to be in, and then what is your objective, right? Because once you kind of lay out the understanding of each position, then people will start to be able to figure it out. And then the techniques will start to make sense, right? I mean, the whole idea of like armbar from the guard as a fundamental, sure. But let's say you never develop an armbar from the guard, but you have an amazing triangle and you have an amazing guillotine and you can finish everyone that you put in the guard do you need an armbar? You know what I'm saying? So I think the fundamentals is not so much a technique. It's more of an understanding of what you're trying to achieve from each position. This is the idea. This is the concepts. And then you will, like, each student will develop their own techniques or develop themselves to be able to apply those ideas. Because as you know, Josh, like triangle, right? Triangle from the guard. Well, there's just certain individuals that are built for triangles. Guys that are tall, lanky, skinny, they're built for triangles. If you take a short person with really thick legs, they struggle with a triangle. So what most people consider a fundamental technique, right? The triangle is probably one of the techniques that most people learn probably within the first 6 months of training. That is just a technique that I wouldn't really encourage someone that doesn't have the body type to really put a ton of time in, because they're just going to struggle with it, right? So yeah, for me, when I talk about the fundamentals, I really talk about the ideas and the concepts behind each position, like the idea of how to maintain and dominant positions is crucial, right? So that's a fundamental, like how to maintain the mount, right? And then, okay, now we're going to dive into how to maintain the mount. Well, the first thing we need to understand when you're talking about maintaining the mount is, what are the things the person's going to do to try to get out, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are their escapes? And then once you understand, oh, these are the things that the person might do. They might try to trap my arm and bridge me. They might try to turn on their side and get their leg underneath my leg. Then you kind of start to develop the understanding, okay, these are the things that might happen. This is how we would deal with it, right? So I think when I talk about the fundamentals, when I try to teach the fundamentals, I try to, because the fundamentals, the other thing too with the fundamentals, they can go very deep, right? They can go very, very, very deep. The guys that are the best guys in the world over the last, probably 3-4 decades. If you think about the GOATs, right? My teacher Rickson in his time was pretty much without argue the best in the world. And then I think after that, I think most people would consider Hodger the best in the world. I mean, for him to be able to come out of retirement, not trained in a gi in 5 years, compete against Buchecha, who is the 8-time, world champion, I think he was 25 pounds heavier and 13 years younger. And for Hodger to submit him within 2 minutes of the fight hitting the ground, that's pretty, it's pretty spectacular, right? To think, wow, this guy's almost 40. He comes out of retirement after not training in the gi for 5 years and just, smokes the current multiple-time world champion, and made it look, relatively easy. I mean, he basically, when you talk about fundamentals, he pulled guard, arm drag to the back, and got him with a bow and arrow, right? So most people, by the time they're a blue belt, understand that sequence, right? They know how to pull guard. They know how to do like kind of an arm drag. They understand how to take the back. And then they know how to do a bow and arrow, but how many people can do that to buchecha? So that's the idea is like, the understanding of the fundamentals can go so deep. So I think really the fundamentals is mostly an idea, a concept of like, hey, this is what you need. This is kind of the foundation that you need to be able to develop yourself to have a high level game. Right.
Mhm.
That's really what a fundamentals found is like laying the foundation for people to develop a high level game. So if you just work on this stuff, you can, and it's not the same for everyone. Not everyone has to have the same game, but they do have to be strong in all of these specific positions. Right.
That makes perfect sense. Would you say then, do you kind of have, if somebody was approaching you as a coach and was starting from the beginning, do you kind of have something that you start with every time? Or do you like to go, hey, you do have longer legs, you do have a different body type or a different background or whatever? How do you kind of look at it?
Yeah. So I always take that into account, especially with private students, right? Because I've been teaching jujitsu now. I've been training for 28 years, and I've been teaching now for 14 years. No, sorry, 24 years. So I've been teaching for 24 years. And so the students, especially when you're doing privates, right? Like analyzing the student and seeing kind of what's best for them is always important, right? There's just some people that certain techniques are not going to work great for. The beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is that it works for everyone. There's advantages to being big and strong. There's advantages to being small and light. There's advantages to being tall and lanky. Smaller people can actually fit their joints into smaller holes. It's easier for them to get out. It's easier for them to find space, so against smaller person, it's a lot harder to control them because there's so much more openings for them to be able to get out. Bigger people, a little bit easier to control, but there's a lot more power that you need to deal with, a lot more strength that you need to deal with. Longer people have a hard time. Like if you close up space on a tall, lanky person, they have a very difficult time recovering because they have to create so much movement to create space to get limbs back inside, So that always makes a difference. But the main idea for me, like if I were going to take a student from day one, the first thing is I explain to them like, okay, these are the positions in jiu-jitsu, right? We have mount, and this is the top position. This is the bottom position. When you're on top, what you're looking to do is you're looking to maintain the position. You're looking to finish. If he turns too much, you can take the back. When you're on the bottom, you're looking to get out, right? One of the ways that you can get out is obviously put the person back in the guard. Then I'll go over the techniques, right? And then from cross-side, right? Cross-side, this is the position. Look, you're trying to keep the person flat on their back, person on the bottom. If you're on the bottom, the first thing you want to do, the first objective for you is to try to get to your side. Once you get to your side, then these escapes open up. Like you can get back to your knees, you can put them back in the guard. So I kind of give them a rundown. So it usually goes like mount, cross-side, guard, then half guard, and then the back position, right? So I take those 5 positions and I break it up to the dominant position and the non-dominant position. So, hey, when someone's on your back, that's a bad position for you. They're looking to probably choke you. So hands up to defend. And then you're looking to try to turn and face them or get them off your back. When you have someone's back, the main thing you're looking to do is secure a choke. And, this is the method by which we go about doing that, right? They're going to have some type of defense up. This is how you start to break down their defense to be able to get the choke. So I kind of take them through like, this is the good position. This is the bad, just so that as a new student, right? Just so that they have an idea like, okay, these are the places that I'm trying to get to, right? However they get to it, like especially in the beginning, because there's so many techniques in jiu-jitsu, it can be so overwhelming for a new student. It's just like, hey, these are the places that you're trying to get to. You want to try to get to cross-side on top, or if you're on the bottom, put them in your guard, right? So that's like have the person in between your legs. So that way they kind of have a goal or objective of where they're trying to be, and they know, okay, I'm in this position. That's a good position for me. And when I'm in this position, I want to try to control and look for submissions. Or when I'm in this bad position, I need to be careful and I need to try to get out, right? that's kind of like the beginning stages of understanding the game.
And that makes sense. And that is something that when I travel, when I train with other people, I always see the better schools have some approach that they know the big ideas. They know the things that they know you need to get on your side in side control and in mount. But then there are also the other side. There are still people that when you tell them that, they're like, what? Wait, what? All of
Yeah.
my escapes open up then, or I'm able to actually escape this position and defend this position. Do
Yeah,
you
very specifically on your side, when you're cross-eyed, you definitely want to get to your side. Obviously, and you experience that with the weight distribution, right? If against someone that knows how to put pressure and knows how to use their weight, it can be very uncomfortable. From the mount, though, there's a lot of escapes where you're flat on your back, right? Like if you think about the trap and roll, you want to be flat on your back. It's really hard to bridge someone when you're on your side. And then that kipping escape that a lot of people are using now, where they're pushing on the hips, that's another one where you kind of start flat on your back. And so, but yeah, for the most part, it's just, explaining to people, hey, you want to get out of here. This is a bad position. You want to get out. Right. And then now let me show you some methods by which we can go about achieving that. Right. And then that's what gets into the technique. Let me show you this technique. This is a method of which will help you get out of this position. Or, oh, we're mounted and we're looking for a submission. Oh, this is a method by which you can submit your opponent. Let me show you this Americana, right? Or let me show you this head and arm choke. So once people understand like the philosophy, the concepts, then the techniques start to make so much more sense.
And so when this objective based, goal based approach to jiu-jitsu, you've taught for 24 years. Have you used it the whole 24 years? Has this always been the approach that you've looked at?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, with Rickson, if you look at it, I mean, there's not much footage of him, unfortunately, but his game is super basic, super fundamental. So we were always huge on the basics and the fundamentals, like I was mentioning before, like if you look at the best guys the last 30 years, Rickson, then Hodger, and now probably Gordon, like what they're doing is very, very, they're mauling people like with basics, you know what I'm saying? Like they're mauling people like Gordon, who was it, the Pedro Mourinho match where he mounted Pedro Mourinho and basically held him mount for almost 25 minutes, right? Probably a little less because the first few minutes of the match, but a good 13, 14 minutes. Pedro got out twice, but then he passed real fast and mounted again and basically just held mount on him. He was trying to tap him out to pressure, but like kind of more smothering, but he kind of kept finding pockets of air. But I mean, the ability to even maintain that position, that's when you really can truly dominate people, right? So that even though that's very fundamental, like how to maintain mount, like you see someone that's able to do it against the highest level competition and make it look easy, right? Yeah. He was even like at times like rubbing his head, right? So I think all of the best guys in the world, the guys that have really achieved a level where they are so far past everybody else, they're like Gordon Ryan is starting to show that a little bit, where he's like kind of like distancing himself from the number two guys. Rickson, they always said like, with Rickson, Rickson was always up here and all the number two guys are down here. Right. They're not even close. Like you have number two and then number three and then number four and then number five. And then he's like all the way up here. And I got to, I was in such a fortunate position during those years that he was actively training, seeing all the current world champions year after year after year come in and train with him and him do exactly that. Right. Just submit them multiple times in like a 5, 6, 7 minute round. So, that was very eye-opening for me, and it was very inspirational for me to see that, wow, someone can achieve the level that they can just make it look effortless these are the best guys in the world, and he makes it look effortless, like tapping them out, right?
Yeah, that really is amazing. And something about the guys you're naming is it seems as though you look at Hodger, you even look at Hodger in the Buchecha match. So Hodger is able to finish by submission 2 minutes after they hit the ground. But how much offense of Buchecha did he absorb on the feet or just aggressive shots that Buchecha was taking? And he didn't there was no time that Buchecha's offense worked. And that was like what was so amazing to me about seeing Roger is, you see him on the run where no one scored on him, that the offense just wasn't working. And so that's, to me, it seemed as though that was the basics of his jiu-jitsu, was that his defense was so good that he didn't need much offense. He just needed the timing of when to go for it.
Yeah, well, there's a strategy, right? Obviously, like, and I think he even explained it afterwards. Like, he knew Buchecha was going to come out hard. He knew he was going to, so he basically kept it on the feet, let Buchecha wear himself out the first few minutes. And then after, I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes was the game plan. After 4 or 5 minutes, then he was going to bring the fight to the ground. And that's what he did. He pulled guard after, I think, 4 or 5 minutes. So that's a strategy thing where, in the context of jiu-jitsu, the idea is the defense is always shorter than the offense. The person that is trying to initiate offense or trying to gain ground always has to expend more energy to do whatever they're trying to do. Where with defense, you really just have to make one adjustment or one movement to basically shut down. So the idea is this, anytime you're trying a technique, right? Usually any type of technique is a series of 2 to 3 movements. If I can stop that technique at any step along the way, I can shut down the technique, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's really with what you're talking about with defense, is like, if you can shut it down, he drops and he shoots. A big thing too is like they were keeping quite a bit of distance, so like he had enough time to sprawl and deal with the shots. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to defend than to be offensive. I don't know if you've ever done this drill, this takedown drill, where you have 2 people and one person is just focused on defense and the other person has to take that person down. It's a really, really tough drill, but it makes it 10 times harder for the guy doing takedowns, because this person is basically just trying to defend. And so this person, we used to do like trainings like that where we'd line up everyone up against the wall and we'd have 3 people inside, and it would be like a rotating chain. So if this person coming in got to take this person out, he would be the one in defending now, and that person goes up against the wall. And so the thing is, like, after a minute of just constantly trying to take someone down, you get exhausted.
Yeah.
You get exhausted. And that's why we have the guy that's defending staying in the middle, because he can absorb usually 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 fresh guys coming in, trying to take him down for a minute, because it's basically just managing distance, not letting them get to your hips, not letting them get to your legs,
What's up, guys? Josh McKinney here, sitting down with my dad, Steve, and we are just talking about something exciting. We run simplifyingjujitsu.com together, and we have really the biggest product we've ever put together, the most work we've ever put into a product. And it is called Efficient BJJ Strength in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I wanted to call it Train Muscles and Save Joints, but I like yours better.
I think that is one of the biggest benefits, is the fact that you do save your joints and you don't hurt your muscles. But I think one of the biggest selling points is that it's 15 minutes a week, maybe twice a week.
But you get stronger. And that is the number one idea behind what we do. And then what we do is we put things in a simplified, logical, common sense order, so that you can kind of see how to enhance your training and keep yourself from hurting yourself outside of the gym, because jiu-jitsu is hard enough on your body.
There is so much injury risk in jiu-jitsu. Why in the heck would we have injury risk in our training?
Absolutely.
And so to me, right now, it makes a lot of sense already. But if someone were to purchase it in this month, what's really exciting is we have this thing going called Steve's Bundle. We're also going to throw in, for half off, how to train jiu-jitsu and 60, train until 60 and beyond, 60 moves that work into your 60s.
Wait, say that again, Josh. What do they get?
But wait, there's more. If you, for 50% off, you can get How to Train Jiu-Jitsu, which is a Steve and Josh McKinney product, and 60 moves that work when you're 60, which I was watching back recently. We have a long-haired Bryce Allen getting neon bellied. That was when I made the post about him dying and us reviving him, and his mom was calling. She actually thought we killed him. Yeah. Woof. Great thing, but great product too.
Yes, it'll be helpful. It really does help people, and it'll allow them to think differently. It is different than anything that anyone has out there.
And so the only way to get it is to go to simplifyingjujitsu.com. You can go to simplifyingjujitsu.com/15. That will take you to a page that gives you a little more information, gives you some thumbnail, or gives you some interviews with different athletes that have benefited, and just a lot more information on the product itself. And you guys can check that out at simplifyingjujitsu.com.
So, yeah.
Are there better ways to explain that relationship of offense and defense for people? Because that's something I always struggle with my students to explain, is that, a lot of the time I was defending and you were asking what move I was doing, and I really wasn't doing much. I was just defending one thing, right? I was defending something simple in that. And I always noticed that is, there still seems to be a disconnect when I try to explain that to people.
Yeah, with defense, it's not so much a technique, right? I mean, there are techniques to escape certain things where you have to do a series of movements to get out. But much of the defense, a lot of defense is just stopping the person from basically progressing. So I'll give you a perfect example. Cross collar choke, right? What are the steps needed for someone to do a cross collar choke? Well, normally it's put one hand in the collar, get the second hand in the collar, and then they're going to start to squeeze, right? So if I don't let you get the first hand in the collar, can you do the cross collar choke?
No.
I let you get the first hand inside. Okay. If I don't allow you to have the second hand inside, can you finish?
No.
So now I let you get the second hand inside. There's ways of finishing without, but if I maybe either disconnect your hands, don't let you connect to my neck, or if I don't let you squeeze, because some people defend the cross collar choke by just basically not letting the person bend their elbows, right? Which basically, so now they have two hands inside, but they're not able to create the pressure on the neck. That's another way of stopping it. And so that's the idea, is really the defense is so much shorter than the offense, because you only have to stop one step in the series. Like a rear naked choke, right? What are the steps needed? Well, they got to get one arm around my neck. So if I don't let them get that first arm around my neck, can they finish? No. Okay, I let them get the arm around my neck. Now they need to what? They need to grab and put the second hand behind the head, right? And so that you can see that even in the UFC, a lot of times the guy will have one arm underneath the chin around the neck, but they grab the second hand, and now even with one arm, they're not able to finish. And so that's kind of the idea, right? You only have to stop one step in the series, where the guy doing offense has to accomplish several things in a row to be able to get to the finish.
So for you specifically, if you're going with somebody, how much are you thinking about offense and defense?
It depends on what I'm training, right? So whenever I train, I always have a very specific focus for my training. What am I trying to improve today? What am I trying to get better today? Okay. There are days where I only work on defense. So on those days where I'm specifically focused, or if I'm training with a guy and let's say he's got a really good armbar, a really good guillotine, or really good, right? A lot of times what I do is first I focus on, okay, I'm not going to let him get his thing, right? Okay, now I'm going to let him get the first step, but I'm not going to let him get the second step. Oh, now I'm going to let him get the first step and the second step, but I'm not going to let him get the last step, right? So I do that a lot when I'm training, when I'm focusing on specifically defense, right? Shutting people down at different steps along the way. which is fun. It's a training that most of the time people don't do at all. Most people don't do that type of training at all because their whole thing is like, oh, I'm just not going to let them give me an arm bar. The unfortunate thing is that shit happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you prepared to deal with it when shit happens? When bad things start to happen to you, do you still know how to get out, or is your only defense not let it happen at all, right? So a big part of the training is put yourself in the fire and see if you can figure out how to deal with it. So like one of the things I do, I'll let people lock in a fully locked in triangle, right? And then I arm across, they have two hands up behind my head, their legs are wrapped, everything's locked. And then I'll say, okay, when you say go, I'm going to try to get out, right? Boom, go. So they start pulling on the head, they start squeezing my arms. Can I get out? So that's the type of training that we do, like fully locked in rear naked choke. I don't know if you ever saw the video with me and Bernardo Faria where, I let him lock in a rear naked choke on me, fully locked in. He had his arm across, hand behind. I was flattened out, belly down, and I was able to get out twice in a row.
And you showed me the neck picture too.
Oh yeah.
Of that.
Okay,
You
you
did.
guys saw that. You saw the neck picture. Yeah, he was really squeezing.
He was really squeezing that.
He wasn't. He was blown away the first time I showed it to him. He was like, "Dude, this is crazy." He's like, "Nobody's ever done that to me." But like stuff like that, right? Like, obviously, if I don't let him get his arm around my neck, he's never going to do a rear naked choke. But what if he gets his arm around my neck? Okay, I can always stop the second arm. What if he gets his arm around my neck and this? Okay, now how do I deal with it, right? So, training your defense so that you can basically still get out, you can still defend and get out along those stages is super important. Obviously, it's a really high level training. That is a very, very high level training, but it's super important, right?
So on this idea of defense, what about on the beginner's perspective, just developing defense? What would there be a first place to start? Or would it be, is it again depend on the person? Okay.
It's conceptual, right? So, this is the first thing I tell my students. Anytime you learn a specific submission, okay, anytime you've been taught a specific submission, you've also been taught exactly how to get out. So if you think about it, like I'm going to show you how to do a triangle. Okay, bring your leg over the guy's neck, throw it across the back, boom, lock the other leg in, right? Pull this guy's arm through. So those are the elements that you need to be able to do it. Okay, I got to pull the guy's arm in between my leg. Okay, so now I already know, don't let the guy pull. If I never let you pull one arm in between my leg, you're never going to triangle me, right? Okay, now that you got your arm in my leg, you need to throw this leg over my shoulder, right? Okay, don't let that leg, he pulled the arm in my leg, I'm not going to let him throw the leg over my shoulder, right? Oh, now he can't finish the triangle because he can't throw that leg, even though he's got my arm inside, right? He needs to throw this leg over the shoulder. So I've just blocked this leg, don't let him throw it over. Okay, he threw that leg over my shoulder. Now he needs to lock the other leg. Okay, is there something I can do? What if I fall to this side and fall on top of the leg? Now he can't lock that leg over the other leg and finish the triangle. So, what'll happen is once you start to understand, like, hey, these are the steps that are necessary to achieve this goal, then you can start to kind of understand, okay, gosh, I just got to figure out how to stop him from doing that, right? And sometimes there's multiple ways to do that, right? It's not always like there's only one thing to do to stop it. Sometimes there's multiple ways. And so that's the cool thing is like, you really want to help people to develop a deep level understanding of jiu-jitsu. It's not just the way that most people teach jiu-jitsu is a memorization of technique. Oh, I'm going to show you a technique. You need to memorize these steps, right? And then okay. And then, by the time you're a black belt, you have a huge collection of moves and you know all of these steps to do all these moves, but you don't really understand the art. I've seen so many people like that, black belts that have a huge collection of techniques, but they don't really understand the essence of jiu-jitsu.
Why do you think that is?
I just think that people don't teach the concepts and the philosophy and the idea. I think it's very easy to explain someone to a technique and tell them, hey, just follow these steps and do this, and then this is a move. That's a very, basic way of learning something. But that was never my goal to teach people a bunch of moves. Like I wanted to, for me, when I teach jiu-jitsu, I really want to help people develop a deep understanding of the art, right? And to develop mastery of the art, that's what you need. You understand, you have to have the concepts, the philosophy, and the techniques are all just expressions of that.
When you were coming up, was jiu-jitsu taught more conceptually?
It's hard for me to say because I only had one teacher.
Yeah.
I wasn't so I came up in the day and age where it wasn't on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I started in 95. I went from white belt to black belt with Rickson. Back when I first started, it was very, very poor etiquette to cross train at any other gym. So you were loyal to your gym. That's where you train. That's your flag that you flew. And nobody was coming from other schools to train at your gym. It wasn't allowed, right? If you wanted to train at our school, it was by invite only. And so there wasn't a lot of cross training. And, I asked Rickson about it one time. And he said, look, he goes, anything you want to learn, you can learn from me. I'll teach you. If you ask me anything, I can show you. There's no value for you in going and training at other schools because they're just going to be learning from you. That was his idea, right? That's what he kind of explained to me. But yeah, back then it was very, very tribal, very, very, and again, you didn't have, it's really only been probably the last 7, 8, 9 years where you have all of this jiu-jitsu permeating on the internet, right? Nowadays you can learn from the best instructors in the world from the comfort of your home.
Mm-hmm.
BJJ Fanatics obviously played a huge part in that, right? Where, they have so much content from so many different instructors. I've had my website now for, I think 2015 or 2016. So, probably, 7, 8 years. Now, I was one of the first jiu-jitsu websites. And the reason that I first started putting information on the internet was because as I started traveling around and teaching seminars, one of the things I noticed is that the way that I was taught to do things was so different than what was being taught at all these other schools that I was traveling and training at. And I never had that realization because I was not exposed to that at all, right? But at the time I was like, okay, there's so many people that were kind of really interested in learning Rickson's jiu-jitsu, and people started, looking me up and finding, I was one of Rickson's instructors. I was one of the instructors at a school for 10 years. So they started inviting me to come teach seminars. And at the time he wasn't teaching anymore. He had moved back to Brazil and he wasn't teaching. And so kind of, I was like the next best thing. Right. And as I was traveling around teaching at all of these different schools, I just realized like, whoa, I can't believe that they haven't learned this. I can't believe they don't know this detail. I can't believe they don't understand this, or nobody's ever showed them this or this or this or this. So that was kind of like those first beginning years of me traveling and teaching seminars when I really realized like what I had learned, what I had been kind of blessed with was so different.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I really decided, look, I need to really record this information and be able to share it with a broader audience, right?
How do you, because to me, in the times that I've really, been exposed to people that help you understand jiu-jitsu. To me, especially at brown, at black belt, when you really do have this huge list of techniques that and you're like, okay, adding new ones doesn't do anything. It doesn't make a difference. It's just me going for something else during this time. But adding a deeper understanding seemed to be the thing that worked, right? But it doesn't seem like people still get that. It still seems like basically one of the questions that I have written down is, how can you be a conceptual teacher in a YouTube Shorts world? And you just see like everything is about, no, do this. I want one move. I want one thing. I want the quick fix. But deep understanding is not a quick fix. For example, the example I gave to my students, they were like, well, what did you like so much that Henry taught? And I said, well, that's what I liked. I don't exactly know yet. I go, I know I could tell you what he said, but I don't exactly know what he taught. I don't understand it, but I understood enough to know that it was true. And so to me, though, it was 6 hours of learning over 2 days, right?
Yeah.
How do you, as a conceptual teacher, in this so now in 2023, what is kind of that for you, and just as conceptual teaching really is so valuable.
Yeah, it is. And it takes time, because the first day we were together, I did 3 hours on weight distribution and understanding weight distribution and get a better understanding of how to apply it, its effects, why you want to do it, how to do it from different positions, how to train it and start to implement it into your game. That takes time, right? I mean, I could probably spend even another 2 hours just talking about that concept, but the main idea is like, I want to explain you something, explain why it's so important, explain why it would benefit you, and then have you experience that, right? And so that's the nice thing with the seminars is you get to experience it yourself. And then at the end of the day, my job as a teacher, is to share with you the information. Your job as a student, if it's valuable to you, then you will dive into it. You will, so that's my goal, is to make it as clear as possible and as profound as possible, by having the students experiencing it, right? And a lot of times through that experience, like through feeling it, experiencing it, whoa, this is so different. Like, wow, that's crazy. Like, oh, wow, you're stiff and I could just move you easy. And now you're actually relaxed. And now I try to move you and it just, man, I can't even like get a hold of you. Right. So stuff like that, I think is so powerful because nothing beats experience, right? Experiencing it for yourself.
When it comes to stuff like connection, when it comes to stuff like weight distribution, really huge conceptual things that you teach. Do you feel like for you and your explanation that they're more finished products, or do you feel like they are more, you are still seeing new things about connection and weight distribution?
I have a very deep understanding of those two elements in jiu-jitsu and its application to jiu-jitsu. Learning in jiu-jitsu is never finished.
Of course.
Right. But I have probably when I look at other instructors, most people don't talk about those things at all, weight distribution, connection. Just now you start to hear some people using the word connection. You start to hear some people using the word weight distribution, but a lot of times they don't have a deep level of understanding. They're using the words in their explanations, but they don't really understand it, right? So I see that a lot now, because they've kind of become like catchphrases, right? But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm always getting better. My understanding is constantly deepening, but in the grand scheme of things, I haven't seen anyone that has a better understanding or has explained it better than me. And even I mean, I've been talking about it now for 15, 20 years, been trying to teach people these ideas and these concepts. And just now I start to see some people kind of repeating the things that I've been, that I have on video, that I've been sharing on video for years now. So
that is, man, that is super interesting to me. Do you have other things that, conceptually speaking, or do you ever find new things that you're thinking about or kind of taking deeper dives to?
Deep dives,
like just thoughts or different conceptual things that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, especially in my training, I always do deep dives. But as in jujitsu, right? Jujitsu is the world of jujitsu. There's a lot to it, but then there's not a lot to it.
Yeah.
right? To really be good at jujitsu, and this is, the first night that I spent time with Bernardo Faria, and Bernardo's a 5-time super heavyweight world champion. We were talking at dinner. We were having dinner and talking, and he was asking me, because he was so curious about the training with Rickson. Like, what was it like training with Rickson for so many years? Because his one of his instructors, Fabio Gurgel, who's the head of Alliance, used to always tell him, like, it was just like how incredible it was to train with Rickson, and like he would share, like, man, Rickson, it's like fighting a guy with like 10 arms. You can't do anything to him. Like, he just makes it feel so easy. Like, literally, like, I train with him and I feel like a white belt. So he would always share those stories with those guys. And so he was asking me, and I was sharing some stuff, and Bernardo said, Henry, to be honest with you, and Bernardo is so humble. He said, I'm really, really good at about 10 things. I have about 10 things in my game that I'm really, really good at. And what I do when I compete, the reason I was able to win all these world championships is I funnel people into my game, right? And so there's a few positions, like he's really good at over-under passing, right? He's really good at like deep half guard. So he says, if I get people into those positions, I know I've trained those positions so much that, and I know all the answers for all the variables, that for the most part, I have an answer for everything you're going to do, right? But once you take him out of that element, because the day after we started filming, and we filmed like for about 6 hours, I said, hey, show me your cross collar choke, show me this, because I was showing him stuff and I wanted him to, like, hey, how do you do this? Oh, this is how I do this. Show me how you do this. This is how I do this, just kind of comparing notes. And it was so funny. He's like, man, I'm not really good at that. I'm not really good at that. I'm not really good at that. And these were like, cross collar choke. This is like a rear naked choke, like just very, very simple things, right? That you would think like, oh God, everybody knows this. Everybody, knows how to do this. And he's just very blunt and very honest. Like, man, I'm not really good at a lot of those things. Like, these are the things I'm good at. These are the 10 things I'm good at. And I can, beat most people in the world in these areas. If it gets anywhere else, he's kind of a little bit lost, right? Or average level. Like, he's still obviously a black belt, but he's average level, not world champion level at those.
And for me, as a black belt, a coach, a competitor, how would be the best way to go about? I wouldn't even call that. I guess it is just being well-rounded, being more well-rounded, being able to know that, like, man, I want to be a high-level black belt at all of the things that I feel like I should be a high-level black belt at.
Yeah. The only way that you can do that is with positional training, which most schools, I think they're finally catching on to it now. But most schools that I know, they don't do enough positional training. So positional training should comprise 70 to 80% of your training. The other 20% can be like free rolling, free training. But if there was an interview that Bernardo did with Hodger, and he talked about, his preparation for the Buchecha match, they asked him, who did he train with? And Hodger said, I just trained here in England with my students. He wasn't bringing in like world champion level guys. He was training with his students. He said 90% of his training was positional training. He does 10-minute rounds, a 10-minute round from mount, and then 10-minute round from the bottom of mount, 10-minute round from cross side, 10-minute round from bottom of cross side, and then 10 minutes back with someone on his back, and then 10 minutes with him being, on the back. So he said that every training he does is that he is the positional training. And then maybe he'll do some rolling, but 90% of his training is that. And it's pretty interesting because Craig Jones a few years ago even mentioned, when they asked him what was the difference with his training in Australia and training with John. And one of the things Craig mentioned is, man, he goes, once I started doing positional training, they really focus on that here. They're really big on that. He goes, my level went through the roof. He goes, before I used to be able to escape just from trying to create scrambles and just moving and just being like really physical. But he said, from doing the positional training, now I really have a deep level of understanding of these positions and exactly what I need to do to get out. So with the positional training, you kind of force yourself to be in all of these positions that you normally would not allow if it was just a free roll, right? Free roll, the whole idea is to not allow bad things to happen, not let yourself get put in bad situations. Where the positional training is the exact opposite. You're going to allow yourself to be mounted. You're going to allow yourself to be put cross-eyed. They can hold you however they want. And then your job is to try to get out. You have X amount of time. First, obviously first and foremost, don't get submitted. Second, get out. And then once you get out, you reset, you start back again from that position. Right. And so that type of training really, really puts a microscope on your game, because the other thing that happens in a free roll, what happens when you're rolling, right? Thousands of mistakes are made during the roll by both people. The only time that a spotlight really emphasizes something that really bad happened is when one person taps. One person gets caught, they tap, oh shit, he got me in this, right? But during the roll, thousands of mistakes were made. So anytime you get to a dominant position and the person gets out, you fucked up. Anytime you get to a dominant position and you're not able to finish, you fucked up. Anytime you're in a bad position and you're not able to get out, you fucked up. So basically, all of these little things are mistakes that need to be addressed, but the problem is you're never aware of it. You're never aware of it because so much often, like, okay, I'm in the bottom of cross-eyed, I get back to my knees, the guy takes my back, and then I roll over, he's back in my guard. Like, so much scrambling happens and you don't even recognize, like, oh man, this guy, how did he get out of my cross-eyed, right? And then he rolled and then I end up in his guard, but then I passed his guard and I got cross-eyed again, so no big deal. But in reality, if he gets out, that's a big deal. Right? Even if you're able to recover and submit him eventually, like, you shouldn't allow any of that. So I think the positional training, what it really does is it really helps to put a microscope on people's games. It really starts to accentuate and highlight the weaknesses in your game, right? If you're not able to maintain position, if you're not able to finish, or if you're not able to get out, if you're not able to stay safe, if you're not able to defend, like, oh, I get, like, let's say, so I start from the mountain, 5 times in a row, a guy head and arm chokes me, right? Like, what am I doing wrong to get head and arm choked, right? Or maybe he's not head and arm choking me, but maybe I just can't get out. Maybe he's doing something with his legs where, like, oh, I'm trying to get to my side, I'm trying to elbow escape, but for some reason my elbow escape is not working. I can't get my elbow escape to work. Well, what's going on? Why isn't my elbow escape working? Right? And it's usually one of two things. Either your technique is wrong, or the guy countered you and you need to switch to something else. Right?
So something was interesting about the positional training that you had us do at your seminar. And this was really interesting to me because on the podcast, that is, positional, we call it positional sparring, is something we talk about all the time, right? But it's always had been, at least how we explained it, how other people explained it, basically a live round from a started and then, like from mount, and then you finish from there, right? And something you did differently, and this was kind of recently, very recently on the podcast, has been something we've been pushing as the way to be training. You sat us all down and you said, okay, bottom person, you defined some limits for the bottom person. You didn't just say, hey, we are starting, and bottom person, just if you just stand up, then, that's all good. That's what we want to do. You're like, hey, bottom person, stand bottom, get on your side, build frames. You explained it and then kind of explained a percentage for them to go. And to me, that is certain schools I've gone to will do that. And that's why we started defining it. Because you're like, oh, this is happening. They do this and it's an easier way on your body to train. And it really does seem to that makes sense. Hold a microscope up to your jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Has that always been the training, the what positional training is to you?
Exactly. As a coach, I need to create the training. So depending on what I'm trying to develop in my students, I need to structure the training that's going to help them develop the tools that I'm looking to try to help them develop. Right. So let's say we went over today the cross collar choke from the mount. I showed you how to do the cross collar choke. I showed you like, hey, if the guy puts his hand in here to defend, how to counter that. If the guy grabs your arm, how to deal with that. If he turns on his side, how we can basically flatten him back out and still finish the cross collar choke. So we just went over a whole series on the cross collar choke from the mount. And then I say, okay, guys, we're going to train and open roll. Boom. And what happens open roll? One guy pulls guard, right? And then 5 minutes open training, the other guy's just trying to pass the guard the whole time. He literally got zero time in to be able to practice like all of these things that he just learned about the cross collar choke from the mount, right? So it just is like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, why would you teach a whole class on a specific technique? And then when you make it, because when you teach the technique, you're doing it in an environment where you have two people cooperating, right? I'm going to let you do it to me. Boom. You're going to do it just so that we can get just so we can get the motion down. Just so I know, like, okay, this is how you do the technique, right? But at the end of the day, the goal for us always is we need to be able to apply these techniques against 100% resistance, right? I need to be able to do it against someone that doesn't want me to do it to them. So that's where the positional training comes in, right? So now we're going to start from the mount. Boom, person on top. The only thing you're allowed to do is cross collar choke. Even though you have, you can guillotine from the mount, there's a mounted triangle, you could do head and arm, you have hammer fist chokes, you have Americanas. Even though if the guy turns on his side, you can go for an arm bar, you have a bow and arrow. Even though there's all these other finishes, all these other techniques and tools available to you, none of it's allowed. Your job is to go for the cross collar choke, because now you're really going to see. Now you're really going to start to understand what are the things this guy's going to do. And you have to figure out, because you're so limited, I only can do the cross collar choke. Now you have to figure out, fuck, how am I going to get this done? Like, okay, I put my hand inside the collar and now he put his hand inside and he's basically putting his hand here. And now my arm, and there's something blocking. I got to get this thing out of the way. Well, how am I going to do that now? How do I get that out of the way so that I can finish so when you limit things, when you limit people to just these techniques, they start to figure out and develop. They really start to develop a deep understanding of how to basically use these tools, right? And that's the goal for us, is like, hey, I mean, one of the things Rickson used to do in training is he used to let you pick, right? This is one of the trainings he would do. He would let you pick, what do you want me to finish you with? Kimura. Okay, Kimura, which arm? Left arm or right arm? Right arm. Okay, and then he would do it 6-7 times in a row. What do you want me to catch you with? Triangle. Okay, then he would do it 6-7 times in a row. What do you want me to rear naked choke? Okay, but then he would submit you in a rear naked choke 6-7 times in a row. So he would do certain things like that. Or some days he would be going for a specific technique himself. I share this story one day when he was just working on his omoplata, and he basically lined up 25 people against the wall. I was like the third person called out, but he already went through a black belt and a brown belt. And at the time I was a blue belt, but I'm like, man, I just saw this guy get tapped out 5 times and the next guy get tapped out 4 times with the omoplata. I know what he's going for now, right? So all I got to do is defend the omoplata. Don't let him. And then of course, boom, 6 times in a row, he catches me in an omoplata. Then he just basically shark tanks himself. So he just sat in the middle of the mat and just went through the whole like wall of people. While everyone's resting, everyone's watching, and everyone's happy to sit along the wall and watch, while he just, gets his training in and basically goes down the line, submitting everyone with the omoplata. So it's trainings like that really help you to develop to the high level, right? Like now when the person knows what you're going for and that's the only thing they're focused on defending and you can still do it, that's when you start to develop a level of mastery. And I think, when you talk about training jiu-jitsu, I mean, that's the level that we should all strive for. Will we ever achieve it? Who knows, right? But we should always aim there. And if I get here, then it is what it is, right? But yeah, so that's kind of the idea for me, is like, man, how do we achieve mastery of the art? And like, there's certain trainings, there's certain ways to train which will have far more beneficial use of your time than just open rolling. For me, I feel like that's kind of like the biggest waste of time. If you're really trying to develop yourself to a high level, it's great for a workout. It's great to get a good workout, but there's no, besides tap the person out, there's no focus on it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and that makes so much sense that you lose 1,000 fights when you're getting submitted. Why? And then for most people, they go, well, how do I defend an arm? How do I escape the armbar? And it was like, dude, you got mounted.
Yeah, there's a million things that you did wrong leading up to that, right? The reason you're getting finished is not that you made one mistake. It's like that's the same thing when we talk about submissions, right? Like it's not that the guy did one thing and all of a sudden you're submitted. Like in order for the guy to submit you, not only does he have to get to a dominant position, not only does he have to maintain that dominant position, but now he has to go through a series of 2 or 3 or 4 steps to get to the finish. So you allowed all of those things to happen.
On at this kind of point, I kind of wanted to, you've hinted at it a few times, kind of talked about how you're 48 years old. Is that correct? How you still
48 years young.
48 years young. Exactly. Perfect setup, because how are you still improving in jiu-jitsu? You made a statement at the seminar that was, I would crush myself 5 years ago, 5 years before that, 5 years before that. Yeah. And to me, I 48-year-olds don't jump up at seminars and do that. They talk about their diminishing strength and their diminishing, they talk about those things.
I got my black belt when I was 28. So I've been a black belt for 20 years now. So it should be 5th degree black belt. I would absolutely destroy the 28-year version of myself. It's not even close. There's no comparison to the refinement and the subtlety, and my jiu-jitsu is just so much sharper. My understanding of weight distribution is so much deeper. I was way more physical, way more athletic. When I was 28, I was a beast. I was just training all day, working, but there's no way that I could still train at that level of intensity, which is awesome, because the whole purpose for jiu-jitsu, right, is that the idea is the techniques become so efficient over time that it doesn't become a workout, that really you can dominate another human being without breaking a sweat. That's really like the idea of achieving mastery. Can I completely dominate another human being without effortlessly, right? Or make it seem effortless? That's when you see, wow, man, that guy's on another level, right? What was that match that Marigali just had at
with Kynan?
Yeah. That, right? Like
that's that is a great
wow. So like you watch that, you're like, wow, okay, this is a different level, right? It's a different level. Like you could see that there's a huge disparity in skill between those two guys when he just like literally breezed through him, like just mauled him, submitted him, like didn't even look like he had to do much effort. Like he got mounted and it was just like, so that's the level that we should all strive to achieve. And if you look at physicality wise, if you were to look at both those guys, Kynan looks far more physical than Marigali. Not that they're not both in great shape, but the goal for jiu-jitsu always was the technique, the ability for technique to be able to overcome size and strength and athleticism. And so that should always be our goal. And that's, for me, it's always been my goal. So even though I was far stronger and better endurance and more athletic then, the amount of technique, how much more refined my technique is now, would be able to deal with that, right? It compensates far above and beyond.
So for a black belt that hears that statement and immediately is discouraged, goes, I know I'm not getting better. I know I'm getting worse.
Training wrong.
What would you say? Obviously, we've talked a lot of different things. What would you say for that guy? What is he doing? What could be
you're training wrong, right? That's, here's something I always explain to people. Your performance, right? Your performance in jiu-jitsu is based on two different things. You have your athletics, right? And then you have your technique. in one box. And all of us, our performance is a combination of those two, technique and athletics. If most of your performance is based around athletic ability, which there's a lot of guys that are crazy athletic, and you can see like they're just very physical, and you've probably experienced this rolling with black belts. Some guys are just a very physical roll. But once you can get that physicality out of them, like perfect example, like with Hodger, like if you look at Hodger and Buchecha, right? They said Buchecha is the most athletic heavyweight of all time. I mean, he's far more athletic. Like Hodger is, you know, when you watch him fight MMA and you look at his body, like he's not like an Adonis, right? So when you think about athleticism, like, man, there's a huge disparity in athleticism, right? So if your performance is based mostly on athleticism, being explosive, being fast, being strong, like getting stuff done through those elements, over time, that will fade. It's a given, right? We know that as we age, we get slower, we get weaker, you know, especially in males, just because your testosterone drops, your growth hormone drops, your recovery takes longer, you're not able to train as much. So if you're relying on that to perform, it's going to get worse over time, right? So what you should be focusing on is your technique, because that is something that can get better over time. So with technique, there's timing, there's sensitivity, there's all of these elements that is not just the refining of the technique, like doing things more efficiently, right? But also having the right timing, right? Being the strategy. How do I set this person up so I make it effortless? So I'm going to make them walk into it. Like, okay, I'm going to force him to go this way. And as soon as he goes this way, boom, I'm going to switch direction and catch him on this. So that hopefully should be getting better over time. And that should be increasing at a greater rate than your physicality decreasing. Right. So that's, I think that is super important. Like, and then one of the things for me too is trying to take all physicality out of it, you know, like for me, when I train, trying to go at like 5%, you know, I'm going to try to go as effortless as possible, as relaxed as possible, as loose as possible, only commit energy when and where I need. And, you know, can I beat guys at 5%? Because if I can beat them at 5%, then man, it's going to be scary what I can do at 7% or at 10% or at, you know, if God help me, if I decide to turn up to 50%, right? So, that's the goal, right? And the only way that you can develop yourself to be effective at that range is if you train that way. So, you know, if you always train going 100%, that's all you will know. That's all you will know. And so that was a big thing for me. When I hit 32, I realized that was the first moment in my life where I recognized like, oh shit, like this is a noticeable dip in just my recovery. I just felt something when I hit 32. I was, man, since the time I started training jiu-jitsu, I was training all the time, you know, 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day. But when I hit 32 is the first time I really noticed a dip in my recovery, in my ability to recover, in my cardio, timing, strength, like, you know, and maybe I was just overtraining, or maybe I was just, but whatever happened, I just realized I made a mental shift. Like, man, I can't keep training like this. And it's too hard on my body. And I realized I wanted to have longevity in jiu-jitsu. Like, it was so important for me to be able to have longevity and keep getting better as I get older. So that's, you know, around that age, around that time is really when I started to start training at a much lower intensity, physical intensity. And what sucked is I actually got a lot worse before I got a lot better, right? About 9 months of not really feeling great in my training. And then all of a sudden things started to click, and I started to be able to deal with people at that point, right?
And from there, was jiu-jitsu, the goal of jiu-jitsu 5%?
Yeah, like 5-10%, right? Tops is just try to be smooth, try to be effortless. Like what's crazy is like over the years, I've gotten more and more and more relaxed. And it's a weird feeling for a lot of people the first time they feel it, because it's like almost like a kind of like moving around with like a water bed. Like I'm so relaxed and I'm so like fluid when I'm moving. People aren't used to that. They're used to feeling like tension and rigidity in the body. Like when you grab someone and when you do something, they're used to feeling like tension. And so what I've learned from doing that is not only is helped me conserve a bunch more energy, but I've also become far more effective with my jiu-jitsu. And a lot harder for people to deal with because they get so lost when they start moving around. They're just like, it's so bizarre. It feels very awkward to people, which is weird.
When you gave an example on the second day and had me put you in side control. And when I started to try to, and I even told you this, but when I started to try to put pressure on you, just put any weight on you, it wasn't like you were moving out of the way. It wasn't like, it was, everything was very subtle. But the way I described it was, I normally can feel where I should be moving on the guy. I can normally just feel on his body where his body's at. And I just couldn't feel where your body was at. And I was on top. And it was a really, really interesting. And that's when you go, yeah, I'm at 5%, dude. And that really, to me, I think there was a pause where I just was like looking off into space, like, oh, 5%. I got, it was like a point where I felt it and I go, oh, I get that. I get what you mean now. And that was super, super interesting to me. Super, super unique. But to me, definitely something I'm digging in on over the next however long.
I think like I don't know if you remember, there was a thing that we did where I mounted you and I said, hey, just move around a little bit and start to get out. And as you started to move around underneath me, you kind of felt like my leg move, and then you tried to move this way and like that part of my body moved. So like I'm moving, but it's not like there's no structure there. So it's really difficult to kind of like try to insist or force or like create movement when you're it's kind of like swimming in quicksand, right? It's kind of that feeling, which for most people is a very weird feeling. Yeah, but it's amazing because it's allowed me to have a lot of longevity in my jiu-jitsu. I'm still getting better. And fortunately for me, like I have my body's 100%, like I have no catastrophic injuries, no aches and pains. That's a big thing that people don't realize. The more tense they are when they're training, the more tension you have when you're training, the greater chance of injury that you have.
And yeah, that again, those things make sense, but they've never been explained to me in that way. And to me, that was like just mind-boggling, that idea of training at 5%. And and this is something I talk about on the podcast constantly, the idea of baseline being like 20%. And for people, that's shocking. And when you told me 5, I was like, oh, that's very shocking. But it made sense, because if 20 was possible, why wouldn't, with better technique, 5 be?
So that the only reason that even myself became aware of that idea, and even the thinking like, oh wow, that's possible, was because of watching Rickson train, right? Like seeing him completely just walk through world champion after world champion after world champion, barely breaking a sweat. Like he would do like a 5-minute round and literally be tapping out guys that were in their 20s, mid 20s, just got back from winning the worlds and submitting everybody in their division. And he would literally submit them 3-4 times in a 5-minute roll, right, without breaking a sweat. And he'd be laughing the whole time and like be like joking around and playing, and I was just like, this is insane. And it was like every time I saw that, I was in such disbelief, because it's so hard to fathom. It's so hard like to wrap your brain around that that's even possible, right? Like it's crazy. And so but once you see it, right, once you see it for yourself, then you like, okay, I know it's possible. I've seen someone do it. It's real, right? Now comes, how do I train myself to get there? How do I train so that I can achieve that level. But the first thing is just realizing that it's possible. And I mean, you can see moments of that with a lot of like the guys, the top guys, you know, that are like head and shoulders above everyone else, is that, yeah, they're able to make, you know, they're able to make high level black belts look like white belts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are these guys doing? Because it's not, you know, I mean, if you look at Gordon, if you look at Marigali, the guys that they're competing against, it's not that, like, when you look at Andre Galval for ADCC, he looked like a gorilla, and not in a disrespectful way, but I mean, he was huge. He was jacked. Like, you couldn't imagine someone being kind of in better physical shape, right? Like 8-pack, like chest, like just no neck, right? So and you saw, like, leading up to that match, like the training that he was doing in his gym, right? Like kettlebells, like high intensity training, all kinds of. So is he in you know, is Gordon that much better shape than him when Gordon's got like all kinds of crazy stomach issues going on? Is he in that much better shape than him? I mean, they're both on, you know, the best supplements in the world, right? So you know, I don't think it's a supplement issue.
Yeah.
So what is the how can Gordon just, you know, literally pass his guard, mount him, gift wrap, take the back, and literally in that order without him being able to do anything about it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it's definitely a technique thing, and it's a refinement of technique, and it's you know, when you can do that to, I mean, I don't even know how many time world champion Andre Galval is, but he's also, besides, you know, multiple time world champion, multiple time ADCC champion, right? So to be able to just, you know, do that to him. And I heard even someone mentioned to me that, like, his whole strategy was, like, at the 10-minute mark, like right before 10 minutes when points were going to start, is when he would actually try to pass the guard. And that's exactly what happened. Like, you know, when, as soon as the points kicked in, that's when he started actually advancing and passing the guard, and to score points. He wasn't putting much effort into it. So that's one of the reasons why they were saying, oh yeah, it was totally planned like that. That's why the match actually lasted even as long as it did.
And man, that that it is so cool to try to understand, wrap your head around that there is that level. This is kind of more random. Have you, in all your time of training, gotten to roll with anybody that was comparable to Rickson?
I mean, I haven't. No, I mean, you know, and again, I mean, I haven't trained with like the top guys out there right now, the current top guys out there. You know, my focus for the last 15, 20 years has been teaching. But I mean, when you even ask even the best guys in the world, the Salos, the Shanjis, the you know, Fabio Leopoldo, the, you know, all of the guys, the greats, Fabio Gurgel, you know, all of these guys that had the opportunity to train with Rickson, Paulo Filho, you know, who was one of the top guys from the Rickson Gracie team. What their experience training with Rickson is, they all say, I've never felt anything like that before. Like, they can't describe it. Like, I felt helpless. I felt like a white belt. Like all those guys that also trained with him were very vocal about what it was like, and they've never been played with like that before, you know. So yeah, like even Paulo Filho said something in, I think it was a Brazilian magazine. He caught a lot of heat from it from his teammates, but he said, nobody's ever done to me what he did to me. And this is Rickson when he was 50 years old, trained with Paulo Filho, you know. And Paulo Filho came up, you know, training with guys like Liborio, Mario Sperry, all of like the top Ricardo Arona, right? All of the top Carlson Gracie guys, right? And he said Rickson at 50, he goes, nobody's ever done that to me. Nobody's ever done what he did to me. Like, he was in just complete and then he said everything that they say about him is true. Right. So he said that in a Brazilian magazine. So yeah, it's weird because with Rickson, like, you know, I spent tons and tons of time and I had so much time rolling with him, and it was just an amazing experience. But it's so hard to even know where he's at, because some days you'll do good against him and you'll be like, oh fuck, I'm getting better, I'm doing good, and then literally a week later or a couple months later, you know, you're even better, you feel like you're even better and you're peaking now, and then he comes in and he'll tap you out like 6 times in, you know, 5 minutes, and you're just like, what the fuck? So yeah, again, and you know, it made me realize, it just goes back to like, oh, I wonder what he's working on, like what is he focusing on. Sometimes he would tell you, but a lot of times he wouldn't, right? He would just, so
That is man, that's really cool. Let's look at this. This is always, or at least lately, has been our finishing question on the show. And so and I'm sure, with how long have you trained jiu-jitsu for?
28 years now.
So 28 years. With 28 years experience, I'm sure you have gotten a lot of different jiu-jitsu advice. But is there anything that sticks out when I ask what is the best jiu-jitsu advice you've ever gotten?
No, I mean, if based on our discussion today, based on what's made the greatest impact for me in the last probably 10 years in my training, I've had so much advice that's been beneficial, advice, you know, on specific topics, but really this idea of learning to relax when you train, it's so cliche because you literally hear it all the time and instructors tell you that all the time. But it's so funny because like when I see people rolling, people are never relaxed when they're rolling. It's like you never see it, right? You hear it all the time, people say it, but you never really experience it. And really the goal is to be just relaxed and smooth. And so that's been kind of my focus for the last, you know, decade or more. And it's paid off massively. Like it's definitely I would say the element that has contributed the most to my improvement over the last 10 plus years is this understanding of really how to be relaxed when you're training and be loose and relaxed. And for many reasons, you know, and I think we talked about it. When you're relaxed, you can react faster, right? It's you know, anytime you're tense, it's like in any sport, if you're boxing or whatever, if you're really tense, you're really slow. So the more relaxed you are, the more you can react. It increases your sensitivity. So by relaxing more, you're more sensitive to your opponent's movements. You can feel what they're doing more because, you know, when your body's relaxed, as they move, especially when you're connected to them, you will move as well. You start to feel their movements. It prevents injury, right? The more relaxed you are, the less likely you are to be injured, because anytime you create tension in the body, your muscles are pulling your bone structures into a very specific shape. And anytime it's like all your muscles and ligaments are pulling, anytime a specific movement happens, right? A fast movement that's unexpected, you can create injury. And, you know, they say most injuries happen within people's normal range of motion, right? So it helps with that. It helps with conservation of energy. Everyone always thinks learn to relax because of conservation of energy, but that's actually the least important of all the things, right? Helps you to prevent injury, helps you to become faster, helps you to be more sensitive. And it also makes it more difficult for your opponent to control you. So I did an example of that with you when I was on top of you. I think I was holding you cross-eyed and I said, hey, just throw me off, bridge me this way. And you were able to move me pretty easy. And I said, hey, I'm going to relax now, right? Try to bridge me off. And you're just like, like you started to move, but you just got like, you got stuck, right? And you're just like, this is so weird. And you mentioned like in one of your prior matches, you were like, I think I was too stiff, or I think I was too, when I got on top of the guy and he was able to get out. And I said, yeah, probably. because as soon as you stiffen up, if I push one part of you, I can move all of you, right? It's like a statue. You become a statue. If you push one part, like the whole thing moves.
Mhm.
So that's the other element. It makes it much, much harder for people to be able to move and manipulate you the more you learn to relax. So that's my greatest piece of advice, which is the biggest cliche in jiu-jitsu: learn to relax. But it's really the most important thing that you could ever do for your longevity and for developing mastery of the art.
And for me, that was out of 6 hours and just mind-blowing stuff after mind-blowing stuff. That was the biggest thing that I left with, was relax. You're going too hard, and how simple of an idea, and how do I reiterate that idea to my students, but still that idea, I didn't understand it fully. I still don't. And that's kind of to me, that was the exciting thing.
Well, maybe we can link up this weekend with the Worlds going on, if you're going to be in Vegas, and I can show you some more. And
I would absolutely love that. Henry, thank you for being on the show, man. Anything you want to say to finish?
No, if people want to get a hold of me, or if they're interested in any of my instructionals or learning from me, I have a website called hiddenjujitsu.com. And so it's where basically I've recorded kind of all of my teachings over the last 8 years. And it's available on my website. So if they really want to develop a deep level of understanding of kind of the fundamentals and the basics, that's kind of what I'm known for, really teaching, right? Fundamentals and basics, but at a very, very deep level. Hidden Jiu-Jitsu, also, I on YouTube, also on Facebook and Instagram. So you guys can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And I have some stuff on BJJ Fanatics as well, but I actually have most of my material on my own website. So yeah, if they're interested, go there, hiddenjujitsu.com. And then I do camps and seminars all over the world. So you can find those usually at hiddenjujitsucamps.com. So.
All right. Thank you again for being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh.
And that is the episode. Thank you guys for listening to this one. Be sure to, if you have the ability to, if you have the desire to, bring Henry in for a seminar. Getting to feel the stuff that I felt was so cool. It really was unbelievable to me. I'm a black belt adult competitor. I have grappled with some really, really tough people, and it was shocking for me to get to experience not even rolling, just feeling some positions with Henry, just seeing his understanding, hearing his understanding as we dug really deep into certain topics. It was unbelievable, and highly recommend it. You guys should definitely bring him out. Hope you guys liked this episode. I'll be sure to try to get Henry on the show again. I really enjoyed that first interview with him, and I think we will be able to continue to dive deeper and deeper. That is where that idea of don't go wider, go deeper when it comes to jiu-jitsu knowledge, that's where that comes from, is Henry Akins. And so that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I hope this episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.